Welcome to another edition of Radio Neighbor, the podcast. The podcast all about the history of Birmingham radio and the DJs and celebrities that made it great. Today we're going to be talking about John Ed Willoughby, one half of the TC and John Ed Morning Show. And our guest today is Jay Willoughby, and he is the son, as everyone knows, of John Ed Willoughby, that is a huge radio legend in Birmingham. So, Jay, welcome into the podcast. Really appreciate you being here.
Well, thank you so much, Randall. I appreciate it.
So let's talk a little bit about your dad. And I know you're a man in your own right. You've got your own career, and you've started something fantastic with the Black Jacket Symphony. And we will talk about that in a little while. So I don't want to overshadow you and your accomplishments in your career. But this podcast being about the classic radio in Birmingham back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 50s, and all that, your dad, a huge part of it from, I guess, the 70s all the way through maybe the 2000s, right?
Yeah, up through the 90s and early 2000s. God, it's hard to remember now. Yeah, through the 2000s. He was still doing at least a 1 day a week show on WJOX on Saturday mornings. Up until, 7 or 8 years ago, I guess, maybe 9 years ago. But yeah, so he even when he quote retired, he had a 1 day a week show just to keep him doing it because he loved it.
Well, that's what happens to old radio guys. You know, they
Right.
they say they retire, but it's not really. It's 1 day a week. Give me 2 hours on the radio or an hour, and I'm happy.
Exactly, and that's really and it really gave him something to do, something to go to think about all week. I mean, he would rip out news stories or sports mainly. They talk more about sports at that point. But, so during the week, he was always just, thinking about something, and something when he did actually retire and not go in once a week, because it was hard for him to get there. I could just see him. He just kind of lost a little bit of spark that he had, even, like I said, doing it once a week, just giving him something to look forward to.
So your dad, I guess, was a furniture store owner. And was a caller to the TC show at ERC or SGN rather in the 70s. And just tell me how that kind of happened and how he ended up as a co-host.
Yes, his father owned a furniture store in Fairfield, Alabama, Willoughby Furniture. And Dad, I think when he got out of college, just thought that's what he was going to do the rest of his life. He actually even opened up a satellite Willoughby Interiors, it was called, in Vestavia Mall. And I think it took him a very short amount of time to figure out he really did not like retail. And from there, he got his real estate license, did that, got his real estate broker's license, did that kind of, did well, but he just never found his niche. But he did a whole lot of public speaking. He was just always, since birth, just a really, really funny person. He was just known as the funny guy in his college fraternity and stuff. And at college, he was the class clown. He was just always the funny guy. So he started doing some speaking, mainly for the University of Alabama and touchdown clubs, quarterback clubs, things like that. And he did a whole lot of emceeing, and he killed whenever he did it. He was just fantastic at it. And from that is reason when Tommy moved back, and Dad knew Doug and Tommy from a long time ago. He was really better friends with Doug than Tommy. He and Tommy were so different, which I think ended up working well for their chemistry together. But he really knew Doug better. And then when Tommy moved back, I think Tommy had been in Chattanooga or something like that. And when Tommy moved back to Birmingham and had a morning show, it was suggested that he get a partner. And they didn't really know who to get. And Dad had been speaking, and he had kind of gotten a name for himself. Coach Bryant liked him a whole lot, which always came in handy back in the 70s.
Oh, yeah.
Bryant liked you. That was better than the President of the United States liking you.
Sure.
In this town. So it was really a guy named Wayne Gillis, who was an advertising agency guy, that had the idea of just an unknown, my dad, who had never done radio before in his entire life, be his partner. And they started off slowly. Dad, that's when he started calling in. But it was on purpose. Dad didn't just start calling in just randomly. He was asked to call in, and he came up with some kind of character that he was doing. The foreign correspondent, I think it was the character. He was a foreign correspondent, and everything was all. And he was come up with wild stuff about espionage, and like he was some sort of spy. But it was typically hilarious. And then I think he came up and guested with Tommy a couple of times. And then this is a true story. They talked about Dad coming on as a full-time partner, and Dad said he would do it, but he would like to get paid.
Sure.
And they really did not get back with him on it. So we were in the car on our way to the beach for a week, to Panama City, wherever we used to go back then. And we were listening to WSGN, and it said on the air, "Tune in Monday and hear the brand new morning show, TC and John Ed."
No kidding.
I swear to you. And Dad looked at Mom and I and said, well, what?
News to me.
So I do, yeah. And we kept going. We went ahead and down to the beach, and he called and said, "Look, I had nobody said anything to me about this." And so he continued the call-ins, but he basically called in for the whole show while he was down there, because a distinct memory also was him. Back then, he would go find a payphone. He didn't want to, I guess, from our place we were staying. I don't know why, but I would go with him, and he would just sit there on a payphone and call in, and people would walk by and hear him talk about all this spying and espionage. Like, oh my God, what is that?
That's hilarious.
Then when we got back, he went on, and they became real popular real fast. No, it was 1975. Dad was in his 30s before he even got into radio. I was 15. So yeah, he was not a radio guy. Did not grow up that way. He's a furniture guy. He just happened to be extremely funny, and he and Tommy just had an immediate chemistry. It always reminded me of kind of Tim Conway and Harvey Korman. A little bit.
I was gonna say. Now, I was born in '76, so I'm in my mid 40s now.
Right.
So my experience with TC and John Ed was more of the mid to late '80s and into the '90s a little bit. So, but still, at that time, I can remember them, at least in my house, they were still big time stars.
Yeah.
If TC and John Ed were on the radio, my dad had it on.
Right.
If TC and John Ed were opening a new car dealership or at a furniture store or at a gas station doing a live broadcast or something, we went down there. Because these were, and I've said this on the previous podcast, this was a time, and these were the people that were celebrities you could reach out and touch, and you felt like you knew them because they were local and they were here and they were accessible.
Radio DJs really were kind of local celebrities. I mean, granted, they weren't Hollywood celebrities. It was different, but they really were thought of as kind of local celebrities. People were, but because everybody, I try to tell my daughter this now because she doesn't understand, because there's now so much content stuff for you to do. It's satellite radio, your iPod, your phone, that you plug in. There's back then there was it's like television. There were 3 stations, and basically everybody was listening to TC and John Ed in this town. There were some others. There was Mark and Brian were on at that early times too, and they were popular. But it's funny, they were on this huge. TC and John Ed also always did all this and got these ratings on small AM stations.
That's right.
Guys came in with these big watt FM stations, and Dad and Tommy still would just somehow carve them up. It was kind of, and they kept asking, "Can we be on an FM station?" Like, why? Y'all are winning as it is. While we move you to FM, so they just stayed put. And those early days at SGN was really. I wish there were tapes from that, because that's when they were just, on fire.
Yeah.
But they were back then. They didn't save anything, and it's they moved stations a couple of times, and this is a horrible shame, but the station will get mad and burn the tape.
Burn the tapes. Yeah.
So there's nothing saved. Not much. There's a little. I have some weirdly home movies and stuff like that from those days, but nothing. Nothing. Saved from those early bits that they used to do. The Angie Proctor, Willoughby Mountain, Buddy Birmingham. They had all these different bits that were just hilarious and completely not written out. All basically ad lib. They would back then they played before they got into all talk. They played some music, not a ton, but that's when they would come up with the bits during the 2.5 minute song they would play.
Right.
They would say, okay, here's you're going to do this, you're doing this, and we're ready to go. And that
right.
And then Dad's whole, goal was to try to crack Tommy up. That was really his thing, and it really worked. If he got Tommy to laugh, then he knew that it was going out. That hopefully everybody else would be laughing as well.
I think everybody was, because as you mentioned, they were just on AM their entire career, I believe, and between SGN, which was 610 AM, and then they were on a VOK for a short time, I believe.
Yeah, and I think that was FM for a minute. At one point they simulcast FM at VOK, but not very long, because then they jumped to ERC.
Right, and which was another AM powerhouse.
Right.
And they were just killing it over all these FMs and all these morning shows on FM. I mean, they were just slaying these people, and it was fantastic radio to listen to, and it was always entertaining. And you could tell, and I think I said this on another podcast, but it was almost like you were listening in to two friends. You were the fly on the wall.
Yeah.
They were just there to entertain each other. And if we were entertained as listeners, I think that was just icing on the cake. But if they were entertaining each other, I think that was the main thing.
That's true. That is exactly I think you nailed it. And because that was really their goal. I mean, Dad always thought if they made each other laugh, then they just figured that other people were laughing as well.
So your dad, in addition to being part of the most successful radio duo in the history of Birmingham radio, even to today, I'm convinced of it, even with your more popular duos that may be on the radio now, I think TC and John Ed have the place in the Hall of Fame, if there was one, for Birmingham radio forever.
I think so, and I appreciate it. But it goes back to kind of what we said earlier. It's just there was, and it's how do you say it? It's about circumstance. There wasn't a whole lot, so everybody did listen to the radio in the morning. Everybody right. So everybody knew who they were. Whereas now, even with bigger and they get ratings and stuff like that, it's just not everybody knows what they because I'd go to school and they're like, well, your dad said this. Everybody, I mean, the whole
right.
Knew
well, And it kind of goes back a little bit if we want to go even bigger with television, with Johnny Carson back in the 60s and 70s and 80s. Exactly. There was no other talk shows.
Right.
Johnny Carson was it.
And you had 3 channels.
And you had 3 channels.
Right.
Now you've got all these channels, and everybody these days has a late night talk show.
Exactly.
Johnny Carson was out there almost by himself. There was a few that came along that tried to compete, but they went away pretty quickly.
Yeah.
But I think he was a victim of the circumstance as well, but it wasn't his fault he started when he did and was as successful as he was, and nobody would keep up. And it's the same thing with your dad and TC.
Yeah, and I'm going to say this because I can, because it wasn't me, it was my dad. Like Carson, I don't think anybody's ever been better than Carson.
No.
He kind of invented it, and nobody. I mean, they're funny guys out there doing it, but Carson was the king.
Yeah.
Dad and Tommy, I feel like, in this town, there was others, obviously, around the country, but in this town, in Birmingham, Alabama, they were the kings, and nobody's really been better than them since. And it was real natural for them. Like I said, they didn't write anything out. They didn't come up with bits the day before and produce stuff or anything. They had some produced openings, a harmonica for Willoughby Mountain. It was a takeoff of the Waltons, That's how long ago it was. But that was it. Everything else was just improv. They kind of got a premise and they would just go.
Your dad, getting back to, I guess, what you do today, you're a very talented musician that's got a very successful product, if that's even a word, but for what you do. But your dad was also a recording artist, and he had a song out called Lucille 2.
Yes, he did.
That's a takeoff of the Kenny Rogers classic, Lucille.
Yeah.
And it's hilarious, and it's on YouTube. You can find it on YouTube. Just type in John Ed Willoughby, and it's there. But I was going to ask you about that. What do you remember about your dad recording it, and did he ever hear from Kenny Rogers?
He met Kenny Rogers before that. He had a Kenny Rogers story that he told. I've forgotten where he was. I mean, it was a long time ago. Parliament House, something like that, downtown, and Kenny Rogers was actually playing there and sat with Dad during the break. Nobody else was there. Dad and a couple, so Dad loved to go out with his boys and have a cocktail.
Sure.
And Kenny sat with him and said he was about done. He was going to quit. He was sick of it. He had been with the first edition, had a couple of hits, and now he was kind of going into his country phase. And Dad, of course, took credit for it. I talked Kenny Rogers into not. But I don't know if you ever heard from him after that. But I know the main memory of that is Dad was really nervous about doing it because he was not a singer. So he was very, very nervous about it.
Before you and I got on the podcast with each other today, I listened to it for the very first time. And what an amazing voice your dad had on that single. Yeah.
Especially for a non-singer, because he wasn't a vocalist. But that's why I think he talks the second verse, because he just felt more comfortable.
Well, I think it's fantastic and it's hilarious. It's great. If you haven't heard it, go look it up. It's great. Your dad, John Ed, was inducted into the Birmingham Record Collectors Hall of Fame in 2006, in addition to owning a furniture store and being a restaurateur, which if you grew up in Birmingham, you knew about your dad's restaurant. Whenever on special occasions, that's where we would go, would be there to the restaurant and as a family and have a great meal. And I think that's a lot of people my age probably and older probably did that a lot with their families as well.
Right.
In addition to that, what some people may not know is that your dad was a highly successful youth football coach in Mountain Brook.
Not in Mountain, he was Cahaba Heights.
Cahaba Heights.
Cahaba Heights Black Knights. He actually named them.
Did he really?
Well, we're called the Black Knights now, or just the Knights. But they were the Black Knights forever, and I don't think many people realize that my dad named them. And I remember the day he did that, because when we were playing, I was young. I started playing when I was like third grade, and he coached. He didn't coach me the first year, but he watched the coach us and walked out there one afternoon. I'm taking over. This is, and he literally was the best coach I ever had. And I played through high school, and obviously he didn't coach me through high school, but he was really, really good at it. He just had a good eye for where to put people, basically, and made it fun. Which was amazing. But yeah, all the teams a couple of years I played, and all the teams are all called different things. One was the Chargers, one was with the Bills. I mean, everybody had a different name. Every team in Cahaba Heights. And he said, we're going to come up with a name, and we're going to vote on it right now, and then I'm going to take it to the board, and we're going to ask if everybody can be called this. And then we voted on the Panthers. And he said, all right, that's it. Black Knights it is. Who said this is a democracy?
That's hilarious. Well, your dad, a lot of people may not know, but he was a stud quarterback at West End High School, where he went to school, captain of the basketball team and baseball team and quarterback of the football team. How did he not go on to play at the University of Alabama?
He played a little baseball at the University of Alabama, but sometimes what comes with being the funny guy, the class clown, is sometimes you don't have a lot of discipline.
Yeah.
And his freshman year, he played basically his freshman year, and I think toward the end, I think he overslept a couple of practices, maybe.
Oh, I understand.
He'd been out the night before, so he ended up not playing. But he was a great athlete.
TC and John Ed on the air for 22 years. Is that about right?
I think so, yeah. 75 to 92, somewhere in there.
Wow. And we lost, of course, TC in 96 unexpectedly, and we lost your...
When it was, 96.
96, right. We lost your dad in 2015, is that right?
Yes.
And but for me, for growing up and the time that I did grow up, which was the wrong time to be a fan of radio, but at least I got the tail end of some good things.
Right.
And your dad and TC, that show brought my family so many great memories, and I can't. I wish he were here today. I would love to have met him when I was in the business, just to tell him thank you for all the joy and happiness and laughter he brought to our house.
Wow.
Through the years. And so it was very special to me. I know you probably hear that from a lot of people, but your dad was special to us for sure.
I appreciate it. I was really proud of him, and I was a fan too. He really was very funny. And you think about it, as a son, sometimes your parent can embarrass you when they're funny. People think they're funny. He never did. I'd laugh just as much as everybody else. I mean, when he'd get mad at me about grades or something, he still made it funny somehow, which was bad when he was mad at me. And he'd say something like, he was like, don't laugh. No, don't be funny.
That's hilarious. Well, that's great that he was able to do that with you guys, and I know you're proud of him, and I know that he's proud of you. And speaking of that, I want to get into kind of the second small part here of why I was really wanting you on, not only to talk about your dad and TC and what a great career they had in radio, but what you're doing and have been doing since 2009, I believe, with the Black Jacket Symphony.
Yeah.
And you've got, for my money, now I've seen your show at least 5 or 6 times here in Tuscaloosa at the Bama Theater. Almost every time you guys have been here, my wife and I will have a date night and go and watch the show. For my money, what you guys do, pound for pound, is the best dollar of entertainment that you can get anywhere. So what you guys do at the Black Jacket Symphony, and the 2 shows that stick out most to me, although the ones I've seen have all been great, but the 2 that I've loved the most is the Queen Night at the Opera.
Yeah.
And the front guy for that show is, tell me his name?
Mark Martell.
Mark Martell.
Yeah, he's amazing.
He is phenomenal. And how he wasn't cast to be Freddie Mercury in the Queen movie is beyond me, because he sounds like him, looks like him.
He actually does do some of the vocals in that movie.
Does he really?
Yeah, and it's funny because he's a really nice guy, and I somehow found him through. I knew what we wanted to do. We do albums, as you know, Black Jacket.
Yes.
We do albums in their entirety. I was a songwriter for years, which is funny because now I'm doing note for note, sound for sound, and I never did that in my life because I was a songwriter living in Nashville for about 10 years or so, and never really copied anybody. And then I come up with this idea that it's not just copying, but copying to a specific degree. But I knew I wanted to do Queen, but I knew that finding a Freddie Mercury would be tough. So it took me a couple of years, and finally it was somebody sent me a video of him, and I finally got in touch with him, and he wanted to do it, and he came and did our first run with us. And during that run, he got a call about doing the movie, and he came up to me and said, they want me to come do some vocals for this biopic about Freddie Mercury. He said they're recording in a place called in London, and it's called Abbey Road. Is that cool? No, yeah, good.
Holy
Mark,
cow.
are you kidding? Yeah, and he knew he spooked me because he's a Christian artist. He's originally from Canada, but he lives in Nashville now, and he was a Christian artist who really did not know much about Queen or Freddie Mercury until people kept telling him he sounded like Freddie Mercury, and he looked it up and thought, well, I kind of do, don't I? And then he learned it, and now he knows, but he doesn't know that much about, or he didn't then. I'm sure he does now. The history or whatever, and so he kept sending me pictures from Abbey Road Studio. Hey, is this a cool room? Hey, is this
That's
cool?
hilarious.
Cool. Shut up, please stop. Pink Floyd recorded Dark Side of the Moon. Yes, that's where the Beatles recorded everything. Yes,
Everything. Yeah.
Yeah.
Man, yeah. Thanks for sending me the pics. Yeah, we understand. You're special. We got it.
That's right. But a super nice guy and easy to work with, and he's phenomenal. I mean, just phenomenal.
The other show that I saw, and I'll have to tell you a quick story. One of my biggest regrets in life, would be not seeing the original Eagles when they were on tour.
Right.
And I had the opportunity once or twice. They came through Birmingham once or twice, maybe even Atlanta, I'm sure, and I just didn't go because, like I said, I'm not a big fan of that. But as the years have gone on, I've come to appreciate that music more. And the Eagles are one of those artists, and I really could kick myself for not going. I want to say they did the Hell Freezes Over tour that came through Birmingham.
Right.
And I didn't go. And
I think it was about $1,000 a ticket too.
Yeah, it was. And, back then I'm not $1,000 is hard to come by today, but especially back then as a 20-something.
Right.
It definitely was. But when Glenn passed away, and the Eagles went on tour, even though they've got still some great musicians and some of the originals are there, and I love Vince Gill, I love country music, but
Right.
I wouldn't. My wife they came to Birmingham maybe last year. My wife said, "You want to go? I'll get you tickets and we'll go." And I said, "No, I would rather not. It's not going to be the same."
Right.
I said, "But Black Jacket is coming to the Bama, and they're doing the Eagles show, which is the one I wanted to see almost the most." And we went and we saw that show. It might have been February of last year when you guys came to Tuscaloosa and did that show.
Right.
I sat there as a huge Eagles fan thinking, and I had seen shows before, and they were great. But I thought,
Right.
they can't be as good consistently every time on every damn album they do. They can't keep being this good.
Oh man, I appreciate it.
I sat there through that entire show. I sang along. Every note was hit musically, with instruments, with vocals. There wasn't anything off ever on anything.
Well, the thing, and I'm always say this about the Black Jacket Symphony, is it's not a tribute band. We don't dress up like anybody. And
That's right.
I guess it's a cover band in as far as the, Alabama Symphony Orchestra is a cover band. We will get closer to the Eagles or whatever band you're going to see than they will because, and that's not saying we're better, obviously not. They don't have to. They can take liberties with their own stuff and change them up, and people kind of like that. We don't. We do it as close as you remember on that record as humanly possible in an organic setting. So we have to be better, and we want it to be that good. We try to hit the 90 percentile rate, and we always look back after every show and say, okay, where were our mistakes and how we clean those up? And we will do specific mistakes that are on albums, and work on those. Like trying to think of one in particular. Beatles have several. Back especially when you didn't have Pro Tools and things to fix everything. Back then, if you got the take you got. So there's I think there's Keith Moon misses a crash cymbal on "Won't Get Fooled Again." Well, guess what? We missed that crash cymbal. Nope. Listen to the record, man. There is no crash there. So we get as specific as humanly possible.
How did it come about for you, Jay? And I know because I've read interviews and just talking with you just a few minutes ago, you alluded to it. Note for note, you don't try to look like the group that you're performing. All you're doing is taking the symphony concept.
Right.
Because I think I read an interview where you said if you go to the Alabama Symphony or you go to a symphony and they're playing Mozart, they're not dressed as Mozart. They're just playing his music.
Exactly. They don't dress in a powdered wig and speak
right.
Austrian accent between songs. Oh, thank you very much. So and tribute and it, I don't know. There's a kind of one of those little weirdly light bulb moments. Because tribute bands are fine, and I've enjoyed several tribute bands, but I always feel a little weird about halfway into it. So I was like, this guy's seen a Beatle tribute band. He's speaking in a Liverpool accent, and he's from Clanton. So
right.
like I don't know, it just doesn't make much sense,
And about halfway through the novelty of what they look like and what they're trying to do and entertain you by their costume, there's only so much of that will get over the lack of their musical ability.
Right. So the whole idea is the reason it's called the Black Jacket Symphony. Put on black jackets like a symphony dresses up, and then we wear all black and try not to. We do not try to look like any of them. Don't try to talk like them. We completely. Concentrate on the music itself, on the parts and the music, and trying to get as close to that as humanly possible.
Well, I think it's great the way you guys hit an album start to finish. I mean, if you had the album in your hand, you guys are following the track list exactly as it was recorded on the album.
Right. We don't talk in between songs at all, just like you're listening to the album.
That's right. And then when that's over, there's a quick intermission. You come back, and whatever hits were not on that album, you guys are nailing them.
Right. And then that's kind of the celebration starts. We do talk to the audience and get sing and stuff like that. So, it's been a lot of fun, and I've really enjoyed doing it. We're not doing anything right now, though. Everything's kind of shut down. Concerts, I don't know when they'll be coming back. So we're crossing our fingers and hoping that things open up soon.
Well, as we're recording this is June of 2020, June of 2020. We're in the middle of a pandemic, unprecedented. Everything pretty much, things are starting to reopen, but big outdoor events are still not happening.
Although we are having one tomorrow night, yeah.
Yes, you guys have taken the concept of, okay, if we can't pack in several hundred people into the Alabama Theater, then we are going to put on a show where people can drive their car, tune on the radio, watch us perform live, and listen to it in their car, almost like a drive-in movie, right?
Yeah, it's a whole drive-in movie concept. It's the exact same thing. You just drive in. We'll be broadcasting on an FM dial. You'll be able to see us. We're going to have a really big stage with lots of video, 2 big video screens on the side, and then we will actually be broadcasting. There won't be any speakers. You won't be able to really hear it from the stage. You will seriously be listening to it on your FM dial. Back to radio, man.
That is silly, dude. I mean, but that is genius. Have you had one yet? Did one, right?
No, we had to cancel.
You canceled. Okay, so the one coming up, I guess, as we're recording this, will be tomorrow night, and it's at the Hoover Met in Hoover, Alabama.
Right.
And you're doing 3 or 4 of them, one a week on Thursdays?
Because of the curfews, this is another thing. If you listen to this later, we've had all these curfews with some of the protests that have been going on. So we were supposed to do our first one last week, but our curfew was 7 o'clock curfew. We start at 8. We do 8 to 10. Which is also on purpose. You were talking about concerts. I mean, that's at my age, man. 8 to 10. I'm done at 10.
Yeah.
So we had to cancel the first one. So we're now concentrating. Instead of doing 4, we're going to concentrate on 2. We're going to do Queen, A Night at the Opera, and then June 19th, we are doing Abbey Road that Friday night.
Here's what I bet happens, Jay. Instead of people honking their horns, I bet you're not going to stop them from throwing a blanket on the hood and clapping as if they were, and got the radio up really loud and clapping as if they were at the concert in a normal setting. I bet that's what happens.
I'm hoping that's what happens to our guests. Whatever it is, it's going to be interesting, and I'm just happy that we're doing it. I'm glad we're going forth and trying to make this work. We thought about doing it in some other markets. It's real. We'll see. We're going to see how this goes, and then we'll either take it or not.
I was talking with someone, not on the podcast. I think I was just talking with somebody one day on the phone, and we were talking about how these artists are, with their canceled concerts and the way they're trying to reach out to their fans on social media. I guess you guys could have done some sort of live stream from an empty auditorium somewhere.
Right.
But to me, this is damn genius.
Well,
and
thank you.
Just brilliant.
Thank you. And, and we thought about that too. But I just, at this point, I think people are ready to do something. And we didn't want to throw everybody together, and we want to be responsible and, want everybody to social distance, but so, if you're in your car, you're with your own family who you live with anyway, and come to the show, 4 in a car, hopefully it'll be something that people will enjoy and at least get out of the house and have some kind of entertainment for a night.
You do a lot of great bands, the Eagles, Tom Petty, Prince, Queen, the Beatles, Pink Floyd. I mean, all these great acts, all these great rock acts. Have you ever, or is there a reason why you don't do a country artist?
Believe me, I've thought about that over and over. There's really not country music is a singles-driven genre. Kind of, especially in classic times. If you go back and there's just not an album, The only one I could really think of is Live at Folsom Prison, Johnny Cash.
Yeah.
A live album. It's very difficult because it's not difficult, but it kind of goes against what we do because we're trying to be specific to a recording that's been done. If it's a live show, then we're trying to be specific we've thought, when you're in the middle of it, you introduce the band, and this is Roger on the bass. Well, no, it's not. It's a guy named Bill,
Right.
So it's just the live portion of that. But we talked about it, and maybe a Garth Brooks album would be huge. And we may get to it. I'd love to do it. I'm a big country music fan of the day, back when it was country music and when bad pop music.
Right. I believe, as a country music fan myself as well, I believe you could find maybe an Alan Jackson album or a Garth Brooks album, right, or a Waylon album, or
Willie Nelson. In fact, it'd be hard to find a Willie Nelson vocalist. There's only one Willie.
There is only one Willie. Yeah. Well, Jay, I really can't thank you enough for giving me your time today. I really appreciate it. I know you guys are busy, so thank you for carving out a little bit of time for us today. Thanks for reliving some memories of your dad and his career, and especially thank you for indulging me on the Black Jacket Symphony stuff, because I'm a huge fan.
Absolutely, no problem. It's been my pleasure, and I've had a great time. I love talking about Dad, so anytime.
Thank you, buddy. Have a great day.
Thank you, Randall.
Thanks for listening to another edition of Radio Neighbor, the podcast. If you like our video, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you can get updates on whenever we post a new video. And we hope you can join us next time on Radio Neighbor, the podcast.